More news tonight from Moscow. 57% of Americans now oppose the US war effort in Afghanistan. And that's according to a new poll that's been conducted by the CNN news channel and the Opinion Research Corporation. And that anger is being turned into protest with an increasing number of anti-war campaigners taking to the streets. Well, RT's Dina Grusovsky's in a Washington studio for us today. Dina, if this poll's to be believed, then that's a heck of a lot of people against the war there, isn't it?
That's right. So many people against the war. But while that is going on, Barack Obama, Joe Biden, diplomats, generals, they're deliberating a new strategy for Afghanistan, talking about whether or not to add more troops, whether or not to focus on counterinsurgency or counterterrorism. Now, while all of that is going on, October 7th actually marks the start of the 9th year that U.S. troops are over there in Afghanistan. And so many anti-war organizations are organizing mass protests. They want to say that when it comes to Afghanistan, there's only one decision, and that's to get U.S. troops out of there. Sarah Sloan from the Answer Coalition joins me today. Thank you so much for being here. So Barack Obama calls the war in Afghanistan a war of necessity. He's saying that the U.S. cannot allow Afghanistan to become a haven for al-Qaeda to then attack America. How do you respond to that, considering that you are from an organization that's supporting these protests?
Right. Well, it's exactly arguments like that made by Democrats and Republicans alike that convinced initially many people in the American public to support the war in Afghanistan, even as they opposed the war in Iraq. But we've seen now that even though there were no Afghans on the planes on September 11th, just as there were no Iraqis, yet there were unknown thousands of Afghans who have been killed. There are thousands more who have been made refugees. An entire society has been destroyed because, in fact, the U.S. launched a war in Afghanistan, just like in Iraq, that was based on lies, and that was to simply assert the U.S. military and economic dominance in a very strategic region.
So what should we expect from these protests, and what are we going to see?
We're going to see a resurgence in the U.S. anti-war movement. As I said, initially, many Americans supported the war in Afghanistan. While we marched against it from the beginning, we never saw mass protests against this war like we did against the war in Iraq. However, now we know that a majority of Americans oppose the war in Afghanistan, and especially at this moment, as they see discussion of adding tens of thousands more troops in addition to the 65,000 already there or on their way there, they know that we must take to the streets, that we must take action now, that we must intervene at this particular moment to show that, in fact, we want this war to come to an end. We want all foreign troops to leave Afghanistan. So we will see protests in over 100 cities all across the United States. In every state, in large cities, in small towns, we'll see the anti-war movement beginning once again to grow, to show that even though Bush is gone, his policies continue, and that the people are not going to just give a free pass to the Democratic administration, that they are going to continue to stand up to make their voices heard, and that's a voice saying that we want all U.S. troops out of Afghanistan.
But how likely is this to make a difference? Because essentially you have to convince lawmakers, right? They're the ones who are funding these wars. They're the ones that are allocating the money, members of Congress. Do you think that this is going to make some kind of concrete difference where it's going to actually change the laws or change the amount of money given to the Pentagon or the military budget?
When we look back to what happened with the intervention of the anti-war movement during the Vietnam War and see that, in fact, an anti-war movement can have a difference, especially at a moment when the administration is at a crossroads. And that's what we see right now. There's a debate going on about whether they're going to carry out a dramatic escalation of the war at the moment that people have turned against it, knowing that increased casualties will result in even greater opposition among the American public, or they're going to take a different road. They haven't decided, and that means the strategic intervention of the anti-war movement can, in fact, make a difference at this very critical moment when this debate is taking place.
Well, we're going to see what happens. Sarah Sloan from the Answer Coalition, thank you for being here. My colleague will be at the protests on Monday. We're going to bring you all the reports from here in Washington, D.C., but for now,